I don't struggle in relationships because I feel too little. I struggle in relationships because I feel everything too early. Have you ever sensed something in a relationship, whether it's romantic, family, friends, coworkers, and you tried to ignore it and then you watched it play out exactly how you felt it would? This is something I've struggled with my entire life. Hey, and welcome to my channel. I'm Mary, and this is The Inner Knowing, a channel where we realistically talk about what it's like to be a deep feeler, have intuitive inner knowings, and be sensitive in a world that's not always so kind. Relationships have always been a difficult thing for me to manage as someone who's extremely sensitive. I sense a lot that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't seem to sense. And when I was younger, I didn't understand that I was different. I didn't understand that other people didn't sense all of these things or they chose to ignore them. And I felt a lot of shame and being misunderstood and disconnection. And I also hurt a lot of people that I cared about because I would take all of the stuff that I felt inside of them that they're struggling with, and I would take it and I would throw it at them like daggers to protect myself anytime I felt threatened in a relationship. And that's really not a good way to hold on to relationships in your life. I think for me, this affects different relationships in different ways. Like in friendships, I can feel a friend pulling away or shutting down or kind of deciding they don't want to be friends with me, sometimes before they even realize that they're feeling that way themselves. Or with family, I could sense dynamics and undercurrents and emotional turbulence before anything even started, or I could sense things that were weren't being said, or trauma that happened in the past that wasn't opened up about. And I could sense a lot of stuff that I would be gaslit for as a kid in work relationships with coworkers and authoritative figures within the work environment. I would I would sense unspoken dynamics, especially in like customer service roles. I would get drained very quickly. Phone conversations would take me out. I didn't know how to manage these types of interactions in a way that was healthy for me and therefore healthy for whatever the interaction was I was having with the other person. Romantic relationships is possibly the place this has burned me the most because I can see people so deeply. So for the other person, I can feel so fulfilling and they feel understood in a way that they've never felt understood, and I can meet every need and be there for them. But I'm not feeling seen and I'm feeling unsafe, and then I'm gaslighting myself and I'm questioning everything. And then I stay too long because I tell myself that I'm wrong. And then I feel something coming. I feel it under the surface. I feel it happening. I question the shit out of it. And then I watch it play out right before my eyes and get very damaged. So, growing up in my family dynamic, of course, I was the one who saw things that nobody else saw. And in my relationship with my dad, this growing up was a sore spot. He and I butted heads a lot, and my dad, I would sense things about his past that he didn't talk about, and then I would push buttons to try to get him to have emotional reactions so that he would maybe talk to me about those things. And like being a teenager, I didn't understand that whole thing. I also realized that he and I are very sensitive, but he's very shut off from his gifts and he doesn't want to listen to them and he doesn't want to believe them. And that was very painful for me because he taught me, like, he gaslit me on my gifts, and then I'd watch it play out and then I'd gaslight myself, and it was painful. And then romantic relationships, it's been a whole other ball game of confusion because I would feel like I understand the other person very well. I see them very deeply, probably deeper than most people see them. I make them feel understood and seen. I give them a safe place to open up about their emotions. But I also gaslight myself when I'm feeling misalignment, when I'm feeling emotional undercurrents under the surface. And if I ask them about it and they tell me they're not feeling that way, I discredit what I'm feeling and trust what they're feeling. And this has burned me multiple times. One of the biggest ones was a relationship that I was in a few years ago, um, where I felt that the person wasn't fully divulging who they were to me. I chose not to listen to myself, and I knew that I wasn't listening to myself, but I was like in this place of I just want this relationship to work. I'm tired of being single. I just want to find a way to make it work. And this person ended up actually having a history of domestic violence and had tried to strangle their ex partner twice and decided to keep all of that from me until one day we were on a walk and I had been feeling it under the surface. I would wake up in the middle of the night and be laying next to this person and start having a panic attack, feeling like they were going to murder me. And then I'd be like, but they're right there. He's right there. He's asleep. Everything's fine. And I gaslit the shit out of myself for the entire almost 6 months that I was in this relationship until one night we were on a walk and I did something that made him angry. And I remember I walked away from him, thought he was behind me. And when I turned around, he wasn't. And I felt his energy shift. And I remember thinking, you're in a dangerous situation. And up until this point, he seemed like the perfect person on the outside, but I knew I could feel something was off under the surface. And I turned around and started walking back towards him, and he was storming up towards me, and I could feel how angry he was. And in my mind's eye, I saw him put his hand up to my throat and try to strangle me. And I very carefully calmed the situation down. We went back to my house. The next morning, I woke up and I put us on a break, and I kept feeling like I needed to do a background check, do a background check. And when I did, I ended up finding out that that person had tried to hurt a previous partner in a very bad way. And I had to very carefully back out of that relationship. And so, in that, I learned the value of listening to myself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when everyone else and everything else is telling you that you're wrong. Relationships are complicated. Every dynamic is different, every dynamic is individual. And over time, I've had to learn to put up boundaries with myself and learn to read each specific person and understand their dynamic. And I've also had to learn the value of trusting myself before I trust anybody else. Trusting that when I feel that pull to connect with someone, that that is a connection that's meant for me and that it's something that I need to experience. I get tangled up in my head a lot in connections, and my perfectionism, because of how I've struggled through relationships in my past, gets me very tangled up in a way that I get scared of hurting the person because I can feel their pain and I don't want to cause them any more pain, but I'm also causing myself pain, and I tend to be like a martyr, so I'll just put myself through pain so that I don't hurt them. And then my trauma gets mixed up in my intuition, which is kind of what the gaslighting is. I try to ignore what I feel, and I've had to learn that I have to take steps away, take time away, and really filter through everything that I'm feeling and kind of categorize things as they come in. I have to really allow information to come in and then categorize it and take time to myself to really feel into what I'm feeling and put up boundaries with the other person. And boundaries are necessary in any relationship, whether you're sensitive or not. But when you are a sensitive person, you need to have external boundaries and internal boundaries. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to tell the other person, hey, I tend to need a lot of time to myself. It takes me a long time to feel through things. So when I do that, don't take it personally, and I'll communicate with you that that's what I need. And I try to be very on top of that. But internally, I have to hold up the boundary of, like, you can't react to everything that you're feeling in the moment, because sometimes your trauma gets tied up in there. Sometimes you're picking up on things that aren't happening for this person right now. And I've also really just had to learn the art of accepting that I am not the type of person who's meant to have a lot of relationships, a lot of connections. I can handle acquaintances. I'm in a place in my life where I do work in customer service, and I know how to kind of like let that person's bullshit be their bullshit and not let it be mine. But when I was younger, I got very tied up in other people's bullshit that had nothing to do with me, but I was feeling it through a phone call with an angry customer who was taking out their bad week because they got in a fight with their husband on me. So then I took that on emotionally. That was never mine to carry to begin with. So I've had to learn to figure out what those pieces are and let them shut off and put a boundary up around, okay, that's not mine. I don't need to feel that. And then I've also had to learn to stop gaslighting myself when I do pick up on something that's someone isn't aware of in themselves, but I am very deeply aware of. And I have to trust that before I trust the other person. And it takes a long time for me to build trust with people. I've also come to find that the majority of deep relationships in my life have to be with people that have some kind of understanding of what it's like to be sensitive. These are my what we call chosen family. And especially for romantic relationships, I don't work with people who don't understand what it's like to know that something's going to happen before it does, that don't understand what it's like to feel things and sense things, at least on some level, deeper than the rest of the world. And that's been my biggest mistake in my past relationships, is I gaslit myself into believing that people that I was in a relationship with knew more about themselves than I was actually picking up on. So it's also been about learning to trust me before I trust anyone else, and then allowing that person to show me that I can trust them in the here and now. It's about me learning to differentiate the present moment between us from their past moments and my past moments, and their future moments and my future moments, and our future moments as a dynamic, because I'm sensing all of that. I take a lot of time for myself, and I communicate a lot. I over communicate a lot of the time. And I also have to have boundaries up around what I'm divulging to someone that I've picked up on. Because I used to throw it at people like daggers to hurt them before I really understood what I was doing or how I was doing it. And now that I have an understanding of how I work and what I'm picking up on, I use those things to bring comfort and safety into the dynamic. I use them to help the person grow. But I've had to learn to read each individual person and allow those things to come up in a way that's nurturing and supportive for them. And sometimes that does mean giving them a little jab that they need, or it means not saying anything and just being present with them while they're moving through something that they know that I'm aware of, but they're uncomfortable with me talking about. So just allowing them to have their space and me to have my space. It's also taken a lot of learning to ground in the moment, not just grounding throughout the day, but whenever something triggers an emotional reaction within me, I have to be able to catch myself in the moment and calm myself down a little bit more. Or if I can't do that in the moment, make sure that I express that I need some time to figure out how I'm feeling. I've also had to learn to accept that some people aren't going to be able to grow. Some people aren't going to be able to handle the things that I pick up on about them. Some people that I care about, I just have to accept them as they are, and that they may or may not grow, and just accepting that sometimes the dynamic is extremely uncomfortable for me because I can see the path forward. I can see what they need to know. I can see how they need to move to become a better version of themselves, but they don't always want to. And accepting that has been really difficult, especially for people that I love very deeply, like my family members. I also have had to learn to not let my heart win all the time, and that sometimes hurting people is what needs to happen, and sometimes distancing myself is what needs to happen. And that can be uncomfortable, but I've also, because I can feel things beneath the surface, understand that that connection is still there. Their love for me is still there, just like my love for them is still there. It's just they're not open to being in the relationship dynamic I that I am willing to put in energy for. So those relationships just have to be accepted for what they are. And I'm not saying accept abuse or accept, painful dynamics that aren't healthy for you or the other person. If you need to cut someone out of your life, then that's what you need to do. But I've also had to learn to communicate in a way that speaks to the person on their level. So I may be picking up things, but I have to put it into terms that they can understand, and then that gives us a connecting point. And I still find that I struggle with the fact that I tend to exert more energy in relationships than I get back. And I think that comes with me still figuring out my worth in relationships, because gaslighting myself so much has led to me not trusting my worth in relationships. And like the example of my past romantic relationship, I stay in things a lot longer than I should because I gaslight myself. And I really try not to do that these days. And so now I have standards that are through the roof, which is great. It means growth, but it also means it takes a lot longer to form deep connections that are meaningful enough to stay in my everyday life. My best friend and I have been friends for 32 years now. My entire life, she's a year older than me, almost exactly. We're a year and 2 weeks apart. Our life paths have been crazy similar, and that's a whole different video for a whole different day. But through our 32 years of friendship, we've had a lot of growth and ups and downs, and we've had moments where we've had to take time away from each other, where things felt uncomfortable and sticky and we didn't know how to communicate where we were at. But the relationship that I have with my best friend is a very deep, communicative, deep understanding relationship. And I kind of base all the rest of my relationships in my life off of that relationship, because it's the place where I feel the most understood and connected, and where I feel like we have this communication of really being very open and honest with each other. Especially like I'm able to just be open about what I'm picking up on with my gifts and undercurrents in things, and even though we've had our ups and downs, there's always been like this soul connection that keeps us together. And it's that that gives me the biggest sense of safety in the relationship. But she's stuck by my side as my best friend in times where I really didn't deserve to have a friend, where I was a bitch. And don't get me wrong, she has her moments too, but she's a lot more open to other people than I am. And us navigating that has been interesting. And that's something that I kind of want to do a video about in the future, probably with her. So we'll see if that happens. But relationships are one of the most important parts of life. It is, to me, the most important part of life. There is no point in being here if I'm not going to have deep connections with people that I care about, that I grow with, that mean something to me. And they are also the part of my life that take the most work, the most internal work, the most communication, the most understanding, the most learning to shut my trap, and learning to have boundaries. But relationships are worth it. The relationships that are meant to be in my life, the relationships that I feel that soul tie towards, that deep connection, those relationships are the ones that help me get through the dynamics that are more difficult with relationships that can't be as close. If you're someone who is sensitive and struggles in relationships or likes woo woo shit or is just interested in learning how to navigate life through a spiritual lens, this channel is for you. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.